Believe it or not, even in the modern world, you can still walk through breathtaking castles and mansions, now long forgotten. Today we're telling the story of the biggest forgotten old money castle, and you might be surprised to learn who it once belonged to.
Every single room is just filled with history.
Now, Adam, we enter this room and I can immediately tell so many iconic photos taken right here.
The beginning of this story is in a time when power in America didn't live online or in public view, but behind gates, along quiet coastlines, and inside family homes. In fact, it was long before constant exposure, when influence was shaped at private dining tables and protected by distance and silence. Now, when people hear or read the Kennedy name, they usually think of presidents, but not the homes where that power was built and eventually forgotten. However, one of the most important places was the Kennedy compound in Hyannisport, Massachusetts. It all started in 1904 as a simple summer cottage, plain and unremarkable. Later on, when Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. began buying the neighboring homes, the property slowly turned into a private family world. Over time, the separate houses were joined into one private estate where generations of the family lived together, and it wasn't designed to impress anyone. It actually existed for privacy, safety, and lasting power. Inside the compound, the Kennedy children grew up knowing their lives would not be ordinary. Over time, as we know, each of them developed their own role, shaped by the environment around them. So, as politics shifted, it pulled the family towards Washington, and just like that, Hickory Hill became an important base. It was built in the 1870s, a home to Robert and Ethel Kennedy. This house was busy and informal, with family life and political discussions happening naturally, often around the kitchen table, often late at night, without speeches or cameras. Over time, Hickory Hill showed how power actually worked. It was a place where conversations were direct and practical, and it wasn't polished or impressive, but it mattered. Eventually, many ideas tied to civil rights and social justice took shape inside this house, away from official offices. Meanwhile, the third estate was La Querida in Palm Beach, Florida. Built in the 1920s, it was John F. Kennedy's winter residence, and although it appeared more relaxed, it remained guarded and politically active, which is why it became known as the Winter White House. Together, these three properties formed a modern version of an old money castle system. So Hyannisport was the foundation and family center, Hickory Hill was the operational headquarters, and La Querida was the controlled escape. After all, none of these homes was designed to last forever as symbols, but they existed to serve a purpose during the height of Kennedy's influence.
Their playground and good.
Unfortunately, after the assassinations, scandals, and the shifting political climate, these homes slowly lost their purpose. Just like that, the constant movement, late-night conversations, and sense of urgency faded. Still, some of the houses were sold to new owners who had no connection to the family's past, and others were remodeled. Their original character was softened or erased. However, a few remained standing, much as they were, but without the weight they once carried. In fact, what makes these places feel forgotten is not decay or neglect, but the absence of influence. Of course, the rooms are still there, and the views unchanged, but the power that once filled them has moved on. To be frank, old money rarely holds on once its role is finished, and when its time passes, it steps back quietly, leaving behind beautiful spaces that no longer sit at the center of history. Naturally, there were no grand entrances meant for crowds, and there was no symbolic architecture meant to be photographed. Even then, every room had a function. Dining rooms were used as meeting spaces, guest rooms housed political allies, and living rooms became places where ideas were tested long before they reached Washington. because the location of each estate was chosen carefully, close enough to power to matter, yet far enough away to stay private. Today, these estates still exist, but they no longer shape history. After all, the gates are still there, the houses are maintained, and the grounds are cared for. Yet the influence that once filled these spaces has evaporated. It's safe to say that these homes belong to a different era, the one where power did not depend on constant attention, and influence was built quietly through relationships that lasted decades, not through public debate or instant reaction. People who are still around today say that many decisions were made in private rooms, often over long conversations that never reached the public record. Back then, trust mattered more than visibility, and building a nation without X or Instagram was proven to be far more effective. These estates were built to support a way of holding power that depended on privacy, routine, and long-term control, not public attention. That is why the biggest forgotten old money castle is not a ruin or an abandoned mansion. But what makes this story so different is that the buildings themselves did not fail or collapse. What disappeared is the system that once gave them meaning. These homes were part of a private network where power moved slowly and deliberately through families rather than public institutions. When that system faded, the houses remained, but their influence did not. In the end, what makes these three estates stand out is the specific moments when they shaped real events. For example, at Hyannis Port, the compound was not just a family retreat, but a private base during John F. Kennedy's 1960 presidential campaign, where strategy was discussed away from reporters, and later a place he returned to as president to think and meet advisors, while the public only saw carefully released images of him sailing nearby. On the other hand, at Hickory Hill, Robert and Ethel Kennedy created an open, informal environment where politicians, activists, and advisors moved freely through the house, sharing meals and conversations during the civil rights era in a way that would never have been possible inside official government buildings. At the same time, La Querida in Palm Beach appeared to be a relaxed winter retreat, but during JFK's presidency, it functioned as an official extension of the White House, with security staff, briefings, and constant communication in place, which is why it became known as the Winter White House. Together, these moments showed that the estates were not symbolic or decorative, but practical spaces where power operated quietly, away from public attention, through routine, access, and privacy. But there is something unsettling about that kind of quiet. In fact, these places are not empty. It's more like they are paused. That is how old money works. It does not simply collapse or explain itself. It just steps back. Today, what remains is a quiet record of how influence once worked in America. Not loud, not public, not fast. These homes no longer need to speak because their role is finished, and that silence is what makes them haunting. If you've made it this far, let me know what you think in the comments. Do you believe real power still exists in private places like these, or has it completely moved into the public eye? If you enjoyed this story and want more deep dives into forgotten estates, old money, and hidden history, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Cheers.